We can hear you. We can hear you.
Is that working?
Yes, we can hear you.
Marina, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Yeah, you bet.
We can tell you're prime.
Okay,
There's no
ladies and
question.
gentlemen. It is 7 o'clock and I'd like to call the regular council meeting for January 12th to order. First order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Administration, do you have any changes you would like to make?
Yes, Your Worship. We'd like to defer 6.3, the request for decision on the tender award for ice resurfacing. Administration received some additional information today that we want to review and consider, and we will bring this information back to the standing committee to have some additional discussion next week.
Thank you.
Also, under business for the good of council, just to let council know that we've gathered up all the Christmas cards and we put them in the reading tray for council.
Thank you. Council, are there any additions that you wish to make? Not seeing any. Can I get a motion to accept the agenda as amended? And I see deputies.
I have an addition.
Oh, go ahead, Councillor Appel.
Thank you. Under action correspondence 7.3, I would like to add a letter from the, from Lacombe County.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, I'll just put this in and then get to you. Councillor Terre?
Yeah, I forgot. I do have an item. I don't know if we want it for business for the good of council, or just under information, maybe 8.8. Chamber of Commerce support for registry's office information.
Thank you. Does anybody else on council have any additions that they wish to make? I saw the Deputy Mayor prepared to make a motion.
Yeah, I will approve as amended.
Debate on that motion? All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Moving on, we have no delegations, we have no public hearings, we have no business arising from the minutes. So we'll move on to 6.1 and we'll invite Director Warren and its solid waste bylaw rate adjustment.
Thank you, Worship Council. So under the 2021 operating budget, we included changes to residential and commercial solid waste management rates for 2021. So the bylaw presented tonight, 125121, amends Schedule A of the previous bylaw, and including the previous monthly rates. So this, if the bylaw was approved tonight, it would increase the residential and commercial rates for solid waste by 57 cents a month. And I believe the new rate would be $28.85 per month per unit for residential, and then the commercial office would be another $13 on top of that, and then the commercial solid waste front load container service is a separate item here. So what we're looking tonight is that council gives first, second, and third reading of bylaw 125121, being a bylaw to amend Schedule A of the previous solid waste bylaw 116713 to update the solid waste management rates for 2021.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions on this? Deputy Mayor?
First is just a comment under 5.0. It should say single, not signal, where it states the single cart for recycling and the signal cart for garbage. And then under 6.0 and 7.0, I'm wondering why we have it set For a period of no less than a year for both, that seems excessive.
So those items never changed. So when we actually did this bylaw back in 2013, we didn't want to deliver a bin and then take it away right away, and all the paperwork surrounding that. So council agreed that we have a minimum charge of 6 months there, and I believe it's 6 months. And with those 2, 7, and 8, the excessive waste carts and the excess recycling carts, we had a couple of residents use that service to begin with, but they since have, canceled that service because they've been able to work with existing bin sizes. And thank you for that comment around the solid or waste. That was from the last bylaw almost 8 years ago.
Continue.
So that being said, I do still think that charging them for a period of a year minimum after they wish to cancel is excessive. And I do wish that council would reconsider changing that potentially to a month.
And I don't believe it's a year, Counselor. I believe it's only 6 months.
That's not what I'm reading here. It says, should a resident request to discontinue, the resident will continue to be responsible to pay for a period of no less than 1 year.
Oh, sorry, that should actually be 6 months in there.
Okay,
Pardon me, that was an error on my behalf.
okay.
Both those 6 and 7 should say 6 months, but obviously we can still talk about the fact that it should be more like a month.
I would prefer it be changed to a month if the rest of council is amenable to that.
Any further questions? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I do remember the argument that you had is, the concern is that if we had a lot of people just requesting a bin for a month, it would actually, the cost would be a lot more than what we'd receive. So I think reducing it to maybe 3 months, so then somebody's gonna say, hey, I need it for 3 months. Then, because we don't want a lot of people, especially because we have a transfer station where we can get rid of waste. We don't want to not be fair to the residents, and I think that's the point that you're getting at. But I think also is we don't want just to create this whole new service that kind of would set everything out to be maybe a little bit more to take care of.
Deputy Mayor?
So through the mayor to Councillor Taylor, while I understand what you're saying, the way that the bylaw reads is that from the date a person cancels service, they are charged for an excess year. So even if they have it for a year, if they cancel in January, they are paying for the entire year. I would prefer that it read that if they cancel, they're responsible for 1 month from the date of cancellation. Because that way, you're not gonna pay for it, decide you want it, and only pay for a month. At minimum, you're paying for 2 months because you'll pay for your service for the month. The date that you cancel, you still continue to pay for 1 month prior. I feel that residents would be much more amenable to paying for 1 additional month instead of 12.
Go ahead.
I guess just further to comment on this discussion, the process to have somebody come and get another bin and deliver it to the author, deliver it to the resident, and then come and pick it up again, and then, put it back out of our stock and back from our stock. It's a process. And when we talked about this 8 years ago, we didn't want people using the service for a month and then canceling it for a month and then using it for a month and then canceling it for a month. So that's where the 6 months was kind of come to a middle ground on that. But at the same time, 3 months would be, definitely doable as well too. We just didn't want somebody taking advantage of that service.
So just for clarification, I'm still on your point. How often has this service been utilized?
I believe in the last little bit, when it first started 8 years ago, there was about 5 to 8 residents that used the service, and then now, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's closer to 1 or 2, if any at all.
Per year?
Like every year in the past 8 or 9 years. Like those 7, the extra recycling card and the extra waste card was really just a way for us to recognize the larger families in the area and allow them to have that option. Or if you've got, 3 or 4 kids in diapers, that's where we had looked at providing that sort of service.
If you wish to comment further, Mayor?
No.
So right now we have a couple of options. I believe Councillor Taylor would like to see it 3 months, and I believe Councillor Stende would like to see it 1 month.
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Well, I think what Councillor Stende actually said is that it would be probably 2 months, because you would have your initial charge, so a minimum charge of 2 months. And I think I could live with that. I think 2 months, because then you know that it's going to cost you that much for a couple of months. And there might be some people that really need it. I think most people would just simply go to the transfer station. It's so handy. But I think the 2 months makes sense to me. Just not having it as like all on, off. And if it became a problem, I'm sure the director would bring it back anyways.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, Councillor Hoover, do either of you have a comment you wish to weigh in? Did you hear all the comments that were being made? Do you need anything repeated? Okay, so Director Warren, do you have a good feeling of where the changes are being requested?
Yes, so essentially 7 and 8 would stay the same verbiage as, or 7.0 and 8.0 would stay the same verbiage as in the original bylaw, but a minimum charge of 6 months would apply for 30-day notice of service change. That would change to 2 months, I believe. Or was there some other sort of?
So the one that I have in front of me that was included in the agenda, if we stuck with the should a resident request to discontinue, the resident will continue to be responsible to pay for the cart for a period of no less than 1 month after cancellation.
Thank you.
Does everybody understand? Okay, so is someone prepared to make a motion for the first reading as amended? Councillor Taylor.
So just for clarity, we're saying the minimum charge would be 2 months.
Yes.
But on 7.0, we're saying that you would have, from the time you cancel, so it doesn't matter how many months you have it, you've got to pay an extra 30 days.
You would be receiving your first month's bill and an additional bill from the date of cancellation.
Yeah, so.
So 2
yeah.
months effectively.
Yeah, it'll be, well, you could have it for 5 months and then to say, I'm going to quit.
You
And
would
then
pay
just
for
be an
6.
extra month. Yeah,
Yes.
you'd be paid for 6. And that's, yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody, if anybody was out there listening, they got that, but yes.
Director Warren, are we interpreting it correctly?
Yes, sir. Yes, I believe so, Your Worship.
Okay, so moving back, is someone prepared to make a motion for first reading? Councillor Taylor,
I'd be happy to make that motion with the amendments.
with the amendments. Is there any debate on that motion? All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Deputy Mayor?
I'll move that council give second reading to bylaw 1255.21, a bylaw to amend Schedule A of bylaw 1167/13, solid waste management rates for 2021 as amended.
Debate on that motion? All in favor?
That one doesn't have to be amended, does it?
No,
first one was.
the first reading,
You can take out the words as amended.
we amended it, so we're just moving forward on,
I heard it as soon as it came out of my mouth.
thank you very much for your correction. So, I believe, let's vote on that again, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Councillor Olford?
I'll move the council agrees to proceed with third and final reading of bylaw 1255.21. The bylaw to amend Schedule A of bylaw 1167/13 solid waste management rates for 2021.
Debate on that motion? All in favor? That is carried unanimously. And third and final reading, Councillor Hoover.
I'll move the council give third and final reading to bylaw 1255.21, a bylaw to amend Schedule 8, bylaw 1167/13 solid waste management rates for 2021.
Thank you for that. Any debate on the motion? All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. To the public who may be watching, I forgot to mention that we have Councillor Appel and Councillor Hoover who are attending via our team meetings. Moving on to 6.2, water sewer rate adjustments. Director Waring.
Thank you, Worship and Council. So as we just heard, the 2021 budget included rate adjustments for water, sewer, as well as solid waste. We just completed the solid waste bylaw amendments, and for the water and sewer, we're asking that the council give first, second, and third reading to bylaw 1254.21, being a bylaw to amend the solid waste, the wastewater and potable water rates for the town of Blackfalds. And further to that, I believe the increase to an average resident would be in the neighborhood of $1.73 per month. So going from a combined sewer water rate per month of about $43.20, we would go to a rate of $44.93 for sewer. For sewer base rate, would go up by 29 cents. So from $14.59 to $14.88. For water capital funds collected, it would go from $10.61 to $10.82. That would be a 21-cent increase. And then the water consumption costs would go for an average home from $48.96 up to $49.86. So, $48.96 to $36. So that's an increase overall of about $4 per month. So what we're asking tonight is that council would accept the amended Schedule B rates in the bylaw as per bylaw 1254.21.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council regarding this? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, just a question on, it doesn't really tell the general public how we kind of come up with this. The understanding of why we would have an increase, where we got the rate increases from. Is there anything, you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So yeah, there is additional costs in the operating budget for 2021, and we're looking at a soft increase due to CPI, as well as some supplies of our chemicals. As far as the sewer, that again is based off of accounts that are being held, as well as the cost for operations. And then of course, for both the water and the sewer, we've got the costs of the commission per month.
And that rate has gone up from the city of Red Deer. Is that correct?
I believe it did a little bit, yes.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Pell?
Thank you. This is a question for Director Warren. Do we know what the, Warren, sorry. Do we know what the dollar value impact would be to the budget if this were not to pass?
I don't have that number in front of me, but it would probably be in regards of, oh, actually, I do have the number in front of me. If the garbage, sewer, and water was not to pass, we'd be out about $286,000 over the year. It's actually contained in the utility account worksheet on, I believe it's the second column there. So the first set of tables outlines what a single service would be year over year. And then the second set of tables is actually our full costs for that service. So you can see the number of accounts increased by 50. And then you can see all of our base rates and operations changing there. So that total, the net change there is that number that I just read off of $286,600 basically, $598. And if
Thank you for the clarification.
no problem.
So Director Waring, could you maybe elaborate a little bit on the philosophy behind our utility accounts and how they work into our budget?
Sure, Your Worship. So the sewer and utility as well as solid waste rates are based off of projections as well as proposed projects over the year, as well as basically the cost to operate each service from a manpower point of view. So between those three figures, we develop a long-range forecast to ensure that the rates are stable throughout a number of years. We'll actually be doing another rate forecast model here for the next 3 to 5 years this year sometime.
And utility accounts are not subsidized through taxes, they are totally self-sufficient, is that correct?
Yes, sorry about that. So where our utility rates are based off of the water and sewer services pay for themselves, so there is no subsidy from our taxes for water and sewer, as well as the garbage. I know in a lot of municipalities, the garbage service will be a subsidy of the taxes, but in our situation, we have a separate utility for that.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I know as a council, we have liked to keep our utilities run as a utility, not having it subsidized from taxes, as you can see, $286,000. If we started to subsidize $286,000 from our general taxes or our budget, you know, we're looking at an extra 4% increase to the ratepayers, and I don't really want to go down that road. So it's an honest service. It's the cost of doing business for what we have, no different than ATCO or anybody else does if they provide a service. So,
Deputy Mayor?
So I'm looking at the current year chart, the one with the blue, and the percentages, 2.64 and 2.48, is that the percentage of the increase? Because my understanding is that we base our increases off of CPI, and CPI was definitely not that high.
Councillor, we base our rate model on CPI as well as other factors. So if the cost of ABC chemical goes up, we would be, you know, putting that in there. CPI is only a factor to some of these cost centers, or some of these tabs in the cost centers. And then as well too, we're looking at trying to replenish our reserves as well too, or grow those reserves. So that's also in there. The total percentage year over year, that's the total charges of 162.70 versus 166.74. So it's the full amount. I know that, for instance, the city of Red Deer, they held their utility and water rates for a number of years, and they had to do a substantial cost escalation on those. So yeah, we're trying to hold the bar here.
Subsequent.
Go ahead.
And offhand, do you happen to know what those reserves are currently sitting at?
I could look that up, but I know that over the 10-year capital projects plan that we have in place, administration has in place, we'll be drawing down from a number of those reserves to zero over the next 10 years for sure.
Councillor Taylor?
I know when it comes to utilities, and Blackfalds is blessed because we have mostly new infrastructure. And our rates are stable compared to other municipalities. When we're talking about what we have as a reserve, other communities, I mean, they could be tearing up blocks of services to fix problems. And we're fortunate that we're not in that situation. So we have a pretty stable forecast for the future dealing with that. That doesn't mean we don't have things that we don't have to do. Just saying it's the cost of doing business, but we're in a good position because of our infrastructure and because of everything that's there.
Councillor Hoover?
Yeah, I think I'm on the fence a little bit with this one. Just, it is a difficult year. If I'm correct, looking at the budget, wastewater, we've got over 6 million in reserves. Water, over 5 million. Now, is it possible to draw from reserves for a time to buffer any deficit that we might incur if we decide to give our residents a break on this year?
Maybe I'll ask CEO Thompson to respond to that question, or ask.
I was just gonna, Your Worship, I was just gonna ask Justin if he could maybe provide some assistance. In one spot.
Yeah, certainly, thanks for that question. The self-supporting utility reserves are healthy at the moment. Without having the 10-year capital plan in front of me, we are substantially drawing on the water reserve for the new reservoir, I think in 2026 and 2025. However, if council wishes to proceed with a 0% increase on the utilities, that would affect the transfer to the reserve this year. Going further than that, if there's no money going into the reserve and we run a deficit, we'll have to pull from the reserve, if that makes sense for this year. So they are in the I think, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but in the $5 to $6 million range for the utilities. But there is money there if council wishes to proceed with last year's rates.
And I guess just subsequent to that too, if you look at sewer capital funds infrastructure collected, the 42,00422, that's a zero item. Before we had the regional wastewater and those rates, that number was, sitting in there building up. So we were able to remove that surcharge every month from our residents. So we try our best to balance that, but the cost of providing clean drinking water and environmentally friendly sewer is not cheap anymore, and those costs will only increase.
Good, Deputy Mayor?
So how much of that increase was because of the city of Red Deer increasing their rates? If we were to only increase what we are being charged or what our residents are being charged for the actual water consumption, the rate that Red Deer has handed down to us, what would that take us down to?
I don't have that information off the top of my head here. I do have a chart, but it's not something that we should be talking about right now, but I believe it's about 90% of the $2.77 for water, and then it's around the same, the 90% for sewer consumption cost recovery, $3.12. we could bring this back, or we could just, look at reducing the reserves by that net change year over year. But we're definitely open to the discussion.
So just for my clarification and the residents listening, you said that approximately 90% of both of those charges is because of an increase from the city of Red Deer itself.
No, what I said is that about 90% of those per cubic meter charges are the treatment from the commission.
Okay,
The rates that they go up vary between 2 to 3% a year roughly.
Okay.
But I believe the sewer didn't go up this year at all.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, well, I've had the privilege of being on council before we had regional water or sewer. And when we were looking at drilling wells, and we didn't know if we were going to spend $2 million to drill a well and come up with nothing. So when you look at what we have today, it's a stable system. It is a utility. We've always done that. But we also are a growing community. We will be growing, and we will need things in the infrastructure. We've never really had to deal with some of the big hits other municipalities have had to deal with, which that doesn't mean we're not going to have some. We're going to certainly have some downtown because of all the stuff that just came out with the pipes and stuff like that. But we have such a good plan. If we take money from the plan, what will be the cost down the road? We're going to give it to somebody else to deal with, because we're just having good planning. These costs are, I think everybody has cost increases. I would love to make everything zero, have nobody have to pay taxes at all. But that's just not, sometimes, I don't think it would be the best choice for us as a municipality for the future of our community. Like there are going to be costs that come up, and we're not taking the budgets and buying ice cream cones. We're taking the budget and we're buying other pieces of infrastructure that are needed that we've calculated in the future. And in the future, we don't know how expensive things are going to be. It could really impact taxpayers heavily then. But if we carry it out, and we've done this as a philosophy for many things. We did it for the policing, so we didn't have big cost increases. We've done it for so many different things. To step away from that, it might be good in the short term, but in the long term, I don't think we would be leaving the community in a better place. And that's I would support this bylaw just for that reason.
Further comments? I have one question. Of this increase, how much do we anticipate will be going into reserves?
I believe that's in your budget documents on the last tab of each of these cost centers, and it varies. But I know that, we talk about the 10-year capital plan, and that's new infrastructure, which we're planning for, but we're really not doing long-term planning except, on paper for that 40-year replacement of the East Railway Reservoir or Broadway Avenue Reservoir. Those infrastructure pieces are really what, Justin's got some information here.
CO Thompson, can
What
we
we're looking
get
at doing.
further update on that, I believe?
Yes, I believe, Director DeGresser has some more information.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So the transfer for the water reserve is at 635,000 for 2021. The sewer, it is 304,000. And solid waste is 176,000.
So just break it down for you. We have an increase of 286,000. So how much of that would be going towards?
Be roughly 1/7 for solid or for waste, and then the other 2/3 would be balanced between 2/3 going to water and the other third going to sewer. So out of 286,000, 1/7 of that number would be solid waste.
But it all wouldn't be going into reserves, would it?
No, but the entire number, Justin just read out those reserves and they're quite a bit bigger than this rate increase. So you would look at the whole budget and all the line items and come to a ratio of total budget line items based off of contribution to reserve. And then you would prorate those three departments over top of that $286,000 based off of the ratios that you figured out before, which are roughly 1/7, 2/3 and 1/3.
Councillor Hoover?
Yeah, the way I'm looking at it, bottom line, we've already approved the solid waste, which I'm fine with. Essentially, the way I see it, if we approve 0 for water and wastewater, we're still net positive into the reserves for this. As much as I understand and appreciate Councillor Taylor's perspective, we still have, it's been emphasized here, a solid plan. We're still contributing toward this. It's been an exceptional year. I think if we're going to do anything for our residents, it has to be a token. Really, we don't have a lot of areas that we can offer a lot back to our residents. As far as I'm concerned, if we're net positive going into reserves and we're still able to give our residents a break here, I personally would like to see us do that. Again, we've approved the solid waste. I'm not expecting that to change, but water and wastewater is an area that, for someone that's really scraping by, maybe that $4 or $5 a month is a big relief. So that's my perspective.
Deputy Mayor?
So I'm curious, because we do have, as you said, East Railway that we need to look at in the future, potentially some upgrading that needs to be done there. Do we have an idea of how much that is going to cost and how many areas there are in Blackfalds in the next 10 years that would need to be replaced? The reason I'm asking is because I'm looking currently at one of our neighbors' utility rate increases from 2017, in which they had a study done stating that an annual investment of $3.9 million was required in order to replace their infrastructure. So considering Sylvan Lake just recently had a water main break that disrupted service for a ton of businesses and a ton of residents, I'm wondering if putting off needed infrastructure down the road because we didn't save today for it is something that we should be really strongly considering when we look at whether or not we are going to not increase these rates today.
I'll try to answer that.
Sorry, that was really long-winded.
So the trick is the infrastructure that you're talking about, like the East Railway Reservoir, that's not a 10-year project or a 20-year project. Maybe it's a 20-year project, but really it's to, at some time, that facility, or the Broadway Avenue Reservoir is even a better example. It was built in 2008. In 40 or 50 years or 60 years, that'll have to be replaced entirely or decommissioned and another one built beside it. Either way, you're replacing that infrastructure. And so our reserves do a good job at trying to bridge that infrastructure gap, but in the same breath, we're not hitting those targets even with the budget we're presenting. We're doing our best to save for a rainy day. That being said, it's not going to really make a difference in the long run if $0.3 million doesn't go into the reserves for the water and wastewater for that year. That being said, if you continue to do that or you let that snowball roll down the hill, then you've got a totally different problem. So we balance that need for saving for the future with the need of having a reasonable rate. Our rates are substantially, on average, lower than, say, Sylvan, but they're very on par with the rest of Central Alberta, outside of the city of Red Deer, of course. The other thing I was going to say is that we always have that risk of having a major $3 million pipeline burst or whatnot in the middle of downtown core. But our risk is substantially less than, say, the Sylvans of the world because of our soils, what Councillor Taylor was saying, our ability to utilize our new infrastructure versus having to deal with the old stuff that has reached the end of its life, and it's at that 50 or 70 year window where it needed to be replaced 10 years ago probably.
Deputy Mayor?
So it's about 12 years old then, that infrastructure? 12, 13 years?
Which infrastructure are you talking about?
You said it was 2008.
That's our newest.
So that's just an example. So our water reservoir was built in 2008, and it's good for, let's say 30 years, right? And then at the 30-year window, you're gonna have to start doing things like recoating the inside of the well, doing, leak tests and and then it goes on, and then you eventually have to replace everything. So it's kind of like an old car, right? And that's only one example of the thousands of assets that we have in our community. So a piece of pipe that's going down Broadway, it might be built in 1980, whereas the next piece of pipe over might be built in, 1990. And so they've all got different lifespans, and it depends on how much they're being used in the system as well, too. So that's where our asset management plan comes into play, that will actually be detailing those individual pieces of piping, so we know that ABC pipe over in the west side of town has a higher risk of failing than DFG pipe in the east side of town.
CEO Thompson?
I think it's important to remember that, I think it was 3 years ago, we understood that our rates need to be increased, and we put a plan in place to increase them incrementally over a number of years, and we do understand the situation, the current environment that we are. But Preston is correct. The underground infrastructure that we have and the cost of rehabilitation and repairs is huge. We are very fortunate here with the type of soils we have, and largely we have new infrastructure, but we have some areas that are old. We've talked about some of the leads on the lines and the program that's in place for us to look at those. We don't know what the implications are at this point. We know that we have very little lead services and things like that. But our infrastructure is aging, and it's just like roadworks. To do a road rehabilitation for a block is a huge amount of money, and it's a real burden to small communities. And we're very fortunate compared to lots that have to do 2 or 3 blocks of sewer line or water main replacement, because that can really be a financial challenge. And we're just starting to build some fairly good reserves. We know that we have lift stations and things like that have to be constructed. We collect offsite levies for them, but in a lot of cases, we don't have all those offsite levies collected when that infrastructure is needed, and have to front end that and collect those offsite levies to replenish those reserves. So it's pretty important that we maintain these reserves and kind of steady the course.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, when we looked at the asset management for our infrastructure that's in place, and I actually, that was a topic of the election, about having computerized, being able to measure what all we need to do and everything like that. But we had a pretty good rough estimate. The current reservoir was 2008, but the other reservoir, I don't know when it was built, but it was built before I moved here. It was built here probably in the 70s, I'm guessing.
It was built in 1963.
It was 63. So that reservoir is timing out, and it's a problem that somebody is going to have to deal with. And that's why when we do our long-term planning and stuff like that, we try not to leave it, because I certainly don't want to get a 15% tax increase because somebody didn't budget, and didn't buffer it. And that's what you look at with those things. And and that's just the reservoir. We have a bunch of lift stations and things like that are old, and they could require a bunch. And all of a sudden you get a few years of some failures and things like that. That money we got can go, and then when we got to do the big thing, we're going to have to take out a big draw or something like that. I don't know. It's just either, I don't know what's the sense of planning if we don't follow our plans, that's all.
Any further comments? Okay, I think we have a couple of choices here. We could go through first reading and either defeat or pass the bylaw. And from there, we could either direct it back to administration with the request that council provide specific questions to administration for them to give concise and informed answers. We've thrown a lot at administration from that they've been answering very well, but they haven't had the opportunity to necessarily dig into the whole process and answer our questions exactly. So, or we could pass first reading, pass second reading, and decide to move forward. My preference would be that given the number of questions that we have here, that we pass first reading and then make a motion to go back to, refer it back to administration, and then task council with giving specific questions to administration to have answers for when it comes back at our next meeting. CEO Thompson, would that create difficulty for administration having it delayed for a council meeting?
No, it wouldn't, Your Worship.
So those are a couple of the options that we have, and it's the will of council as to which way we wish to proceed. Deputy Mayor?
I'm prepared to give first reading to bylaw 1254.21, a bylaw to amend Schedule B of bylaw 1250.20, water and wastewater rates for 2021.
Thank you. Again, if this is passed, we can then make further motions if council is so inclined. This does not mean that the rate will necessarily move forward. Are there any questions on the motion or debate? All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. So does somebody wish to make a second motion? Councillor Hoover?
I'd like the motion to refer this back to administration with consideration of a 0% increase.
Could, Lori, did you hear that? Okay, so the motion is to refer back to administration for consideration of a 0% increase. Now, if that is passed, then I would ask councillors to really consider the questions and the rationale behind that, and to provide administration with the questions, and so that they can come back with informed answers at the next council meeting. Any more debate on that motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is just carried. And opposed, just for recording's sake, was Taylor, Deputy Mayor, and Olford. That will take us on to 6.3, which is now the Eagle Build sponsorship letter.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's some communication that went to council last week on the production of a sponsorship letter, a support letter for the Eagle Builders Center that was undertaken through marketing and promotion of both our team as well as the marketing group for the Bulldogs. And so we had reached out to council. There was a timeline that was requested, so we reached out to council to see if they were supportive of that. And through that process, a letter was developed. The reason that we put it on the agenda tonight is just have a formal resolution to close the loop on this. So I would ask that council provide formal support for that letter that has gone out and been included in the package.
Is there any questions or debate on that request?
Councillor Pell has her hand up.
Councillor Pell?
Thank you. I'm here to make a motion that council supports this letter. I would also ask if council is able just to receive a copy of the final letter.
Well, yes, we can do that, Your Worship.
Any further debate or questions on that motion? All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Moving on to action correspondence. The first one is Brownlee Emerging Trends Seminar. Councillor Thompson, CO Thompson. I promoted or demoted you depending on your feeling.
Thank you, Your Worship. We invited this past fall, and council asked that we bring it back a little closer to that date. So this is a virtual conference this year, and you'll see the two different dates, February 11th in Calgary and February 18th in Edmonton. And so we're looking at council to provide us whether or not they want to participate, and if they could provide that information back to me, I will ensure that we register and get everything set up for you.
So, do we wish to have one particular day, or should it be both days, depending on our schedules?
Depends on your schedules, Your Worship. In the past, we've had council members attend both, so whatever works into your schedules, we'd be more than happy to make those arrangements for council.
Would there be any formal arrangements within council, or would it just be through our own Zoom meeting or our own attendance, wherever we choose to do
Yeah,
so?
wherever you choose.
Okay. So except for information or a request for direction?
Direction, Your Worship, if council members get back to me, and we'll register you and then follow up with you, and then you can make your own arrangements to take part in that meeting.
Does someone wish to make that motion? Councilor Taylor?
I'll make that motion.
Debate on the motion, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. The second one is correspondence from Mayor Beer's office in Red Deer. I may put this under action correspondence because it is my request that we do a couple of things. First of all, she has requested that any council that has that wishes to utilize her in her role as Commander-in-Chief, that they contact her and, commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel of the Armed Forces. With her role as Honorary Lieutenant Colonel, if any person wishes to contact her in regards to information regarding services, etc., that we follow up on that. But in addition to that, I would like to have council endorse administration preparing a letter of congratulations to Mayor Beer for her appointment. Is someone prepared to make that motion? I saw Councillor Hoover.
I'm prepared to make that motion.
And that is to write a letter of congratulations.
Yes.
Is there any debate on that motion? All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And Councillor Appel?
Yes, thank you. So I had sent a letter to council yesterday. It's a letter that we received from.
You're on mute.
You went on the mute. We lost you.
Sorry, I don't know where it cut off. I don't know what happened. I sent an email to council yesterday through CAO Thompson that came through Lacombe County, informing us that we will no longer have a representative from Lacombe County sitting on our Economic Development and Tourism Board. And I wanted to bring this forward tonight as I would like us to form a letter back to the county asking for more of an explanation on this decision. I've got a few things here as well. The letter states that this was decided in October. However, we didn't receive formal communication of it until January. I would be interested to know what their thoughts on and what their thoughts are and how this will affect our joint economic area. And if for some reason they feel that they should not be representing the county in our community.
CEO Thompson, did you have any comment on this?
Yes, Your Worship. I was asked by our Economic Development Officer if we received a formal letter, and we had not, so I did reach out to Lacombe County Manager last week, and we subsequently did receive that letter right away. And so that was provided to our Economic Development Officer to be included in the meeting last night. The information we got back as to the rationale was fairly minimal. We would be happy if council desires to follow up with the county and receive more information if that's a desire of council.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Pell.
Thank you. Sorry, it was somewhat difficult to hear CEO Thompson. I wonder if he'd be able to repeat himself.
I was asked by the Economic Development Officer if we had received the letter, which we hadn't. So I did follow up last week with the county manager to find out if a letter had been sent out, and it was determined that it had not been. So a letter was provided late last week and provided to the Economic Development Officer to include on the EdTech meeting agenda.
Thank you. Yes, so this did come forward to the EdTech meeting last night, and a number of our members were quite surprised and potentially even a little offended at it. So the other thing that I've been tasked to ask this evening is that when we do get a response, if that could also be forwarded to the Economic Development Committee for an update.
So, CEO Thompson also mentioned that he would be happy to follow up if a letter was requested from town council. Did you wish to make that a motion?
I would absolutely like to make that a motion. Yes, please.
Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Just a question, in that letter, did you want a question on behalf of council and the Economic Development Board?
Sure. I would think with the discussion I had with the board last night, I would feel comfortable saying that they would feel comfortable with that, to be honest. We can double check with the chair of the Economic Development Committee as well.
So CEO Thompson, could you make sure that you're able to capture the concerns that were expressed by the Economic Development Board in the letter when you forward it?
Definitely, Your Worship.
Any more debate on that motion? All those in favor? That is carried unanimously.
Thank you.
So under information, 8.1, Director's Quarterly Report. So moving through those. Corporate services was first. Are there any questions regarding corporate services? Not seeing anything. Infrastructure and property services report. Not seeing any. Community Services Quarterly Report. Deputy Mayor?
Just a comment for our marketing and communications. If we could maybe not have the addition of every single Facebook picture and post, that would be amazing, because that was like half of the agenda. And it was a repetition of the same picture 3 or 4 times. Thank you.
With regards to attendance, I went by the Little Park, and they have an oval there that has been developed, and it is really being well used. I've been by there a couple of times, and the youth on there are having a great time. The rink looks like it's operating top notch with not a lot of use. There's been a properly number of use of people within there when I've been there. Were there any other points that any councillor wished to make at this point? Not seeing any. We'll move on to 8.2, Building and Development Permit Report. Councillor Obrey?
I was just noticing there was one number that didn't translate over because 2019 and 2019 don't match. Let's see. Oh yeah, it was basement renovations. That was a 0 instead of a 1 there. Because on the left side,
I see that.
got it?
Good catch. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if planning and development officer would know how we rate in the area for building permits. I'm pretty sure we're probably sitting as one of the better communities.
With respect to the municipalities that our safety codes inspectors do, and that includes right down to Didsbury and everything else, except of course for the major center of Red Deer, we're keeping them busy. They're not in other places they've had. I know Rocky has had 1 permit last year. There is a few, permits in a little bit of the larger municipalities, but nothing with respect to what we've been doing.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
And while our total, which is currently looking fairly pretty, includes industrial, commercial, institutional, and agriculture, these numbers are included in all their surrounding communities when they brag about their building permit. So I think we should take this with an amount of pride in there.
Mm-hmm.
The 68 million that we have recorded. Any other comments that anybody wishes to make? Moving on to Enforcement Services Monthly Report. Next, we should just start it off. Any questions or comments? And the land use bylaw rewrite status update. CO Thompson, did you wish for any of your staff to highlight this? Or?
Sure, we'll pick Terry for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of council, I guess the biggest thing for me to say is that we should have it done this year. It's been a long, drawn-out process. We've done I don't know if a review is the right word. We've actually done a major complete rewrite on it. It is something that we've gone and looked at other municipalities. We've also had Stantec help assist us since they have worked with municipalities. They've got one special planner that has done land use bylaws with a lot of the surrounding municipalities and some of the bigger centers, but maybe the smaller ones like us. And they have two of the planners that reviewed our draft so far and made comments on it. Also worked with developers and have been knowing what the developers are requesting in certain areas in other municipalities and that. So they questioned why we did some of the things and we responded back to them. So we are finalizing those drafts right now, those comments from Stantec that we got in December and have actually putting them all together. And it is our intention to bring the draft to standing committee in March. After that, with council's agreement, we would then go out to do our advertisements that this is what the draft is and everything else before we bring a final version back to council for first reading and then the normal public hearings, etc. The other option that we were discussed was actually going and talking to the developers and builders first and putting it out to the residents first as a draft before we brought it to standing committee, but that would delay standing committee back into June, not March. So this way, council will have a chance to review the land use bylaw coming up in March, make any comments, then we will put that together and put it out to the public before we bring it back to council in a final version.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, just to give a heads up, one of the topics that seems to be becoming more prevalent is the use of containers. You know, they chop them down and make them smaller and they put them, I mean, today you can buy a metal shed, it's a piece of tin, and you can put that up, but you can't put, you know, what can be an attractive thing. So just looking on that topic, because they're, in inner cities, they're making houses out of them. There's a lot of stuff that's being happened. And I think it'd just be due diligence for us to take a look at it and see if we can come up with something that works. You know, it's a fairly good topic. There's an abundance of them. And, you know, there's, as long as they're attractive, and they're no less attractive painted than some of the metal buildings that you get that aren't worth a, you know. So I'm just putting that out there.
Has that covered under the land use bylaw?
We've discussed that. We still don't like the use of it in residential areas from a planning standpoint. And discussions with our consultants, they feel that there are certain areas that they can be used and that, but they are also of the mind that it may not be proper in all areas, in all municipalities.
So that would be a subject for discussion when it
Yes.
came back, because you're aware of it already.
Yes.
And also when it comes to consultation, we'll have to see what consultation looks like in upcoming months.
Yes, at this point, of course, there is no open houses that we can have people come. So we feel that we can still do a good, you know, put it on the website, having people having access to it, notifying the major developers and the major builders within the town, saying, here's the link to the website. Please review it, make any comments that you have. This is going to be reviewed by our council coming up in June, and see if we can get some comments back quickly and go from there. And it'll include the residents too
So
at that time.
So one thing council has requested of CEO Thompson is that there be arrangements made possibly for an open house. In this case, it may be an open Zoom meeting or another type of meeting where council could also be involved in hearing the comments back from builders, developers, and residents. Do you think that's a plausible approach, CEO Thompson?
Yes, Your Worship, it's a bit of a challenge with the current environment that we have, but I believe the technology's there. I mean, if we can offer it up and if we can get uptake by those groups, that would be great.
So maybe you could bring it back to one of our standing,
Yeah.
to the next standing committee or a future standing committee to find out whether council wishes to move forward with that.
Yeah, our plan is to do that, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other questions for Manager Tobolitsky? I know how much work this effort is. It's been years in coming.
Yes.
And the amendments have all been continuing. So we appreciate how much work it is and the work that the planning department is doing to make this document correct as it comes out.
Thank you. Just so you're aware, it is a very lengthy one now.
I can imagine. It was lengthy to begin with.
Well, 125 pages, and we're looking at right now, we're around 200.
And council, you'll be tasked with memorizing it. Okay, moving along, Cultural Recreation Board meeting minutes, November 4th. Lacombe County Council highlights, December 10th. City of Lacombe Council highlight, December 7th.
You have a question?
I'm sorry, Councilor Pell. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is for the Lacombe County minutes. I was just curious, they were discussing the arming of the Lacombe County peace officers. Are our Blackfalds peace officers currently armed?
No, they're not. No, Counselor.
Okay, thank you.
I'll give it permission.
CEO Thompson, is that an initiative of the government of Alberta? And have you had any comments or questions from our police, from our peace officers?
Your Worship, Manager Morrison's here tonight. I think he'd be in a better position to respond to that.
We didn't hear the question.
Yeah, we couldn't hear it all.
The question was, has that been reflected in our local bylaw officers and peace officers? And we have Manager Morrison here, and he's been invited up to speak on this.
Yes, Your Worship and Council. Currently, it is definitely an issue that comes up amongst municipal enforcement officers. It is something that is of concern as officers are continually stopping vehicles that they're unaware of what's in those vehicles. And we would definitely support Lacombe County in their endeavors, and we look forward to seeing the results of that. It has been something that's kind of been bantered back and forth since the inquiry into the death of the peace officer there several years ago. And some of those things were brought forward. But again, it involves a lot of training. It involves a lot of extra costs for municipalities. And those things would have to be weighed in fairly strongly and looked at over a period of time.
Councilor Taylor, was this on this point or your?
This point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just following up. I remember when we worked with the police when there was such a shortage and before attracting Red Deer Rural to Blackfalds, that the training process to get somebody from being a bylaw officer to somebody to be able to carry a gun, there was quite a lot of training, and part of that program initially to get some officers on the ground is that they started them on where they could kind of be trained a little bit and then work through the process of getting them up to where they could carry a gun. But there would be, I believe there's quite a bit of training, like a year training or something like that, to get you from where you are to where you could carry a gun. Is that not correct?
I'm not quite sure it would be a year's worth of training. I think you're also including like all the criminal code aspects and stuff like that. It wouldn't require that. I mean, they are increasing some of the authorities of the peace officers. They're looking at impaired drivers and whatnot as well. So with the increased authorities, again, our officers are getting involved in more, and previous activities that only the police would get involved in, our officers are gradually moving up to. So some of those things are of concern because, you know, it is putting our officers in a little more danger, and tools that they need to protect themselves and the public are definitely foremost in all our thoughts.
Deputy Mayor?
So just on that point, I do understand that the Alberta government was not only going to be expecting more potentially of our peace officers, but have we looked into whether or not they are going to be providing any funding so that our peace officers can potentially receive extra training and extra supports? CO Thompson?
None that I'm aware of, unless Manager Morrison's there is something, but.
I'm not aware of any further funding that's been put out there. It's definitely something that we're always watching for and looking for, and we keep in contact with all the other municipal officers and managers throughout the area to make sure that we're not missing that. So,
And just further, if I may, through the mayor to CO Thompson, are we aware of whether or not AUMA is looking into any type of funding agreements or anything with the province of Alberta for our peace officers, seeing as this is clearly not just a Blackfalds concern, and it's something that is coming up for other municipalities as well?
If I could answer that partly before you move ahead. The AUMA is participating in the policing committee, which has been struck by the government of Alberta, and it includes members from the Alberta Policing, what's the name of APEG?
Alberta Policing, Policing Governance
Society, and it's also AUMA, also RMA, and I believe that one other organization has been invited to be part of that as well. So AUMA is involved in that. I believe they're going to come out with a lot of information regarding a number of these topics that we're talking about. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that your
That was
worship, I was just
helpful,
going to
thank you.
mention that same thing, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Hoover?
Yeah, back to the officers carrying weapons. Is there a difference in the training and requirements for carrying non-lethal weapons as opposed to firearms? Can that get them partway there in terms of training? How does that fit in as a progression?
Oh, absolutely, there's a difference. Currently, our officers are carrying pepper spray and batons. So that does require extra training. They have mandatory training they have to complete every 3 years. And again, so like with firearms, I'm not sure what the province would put in place, but currently police officers have to recertify yearly for firearms training. But the only other avenue we could be looking at is, you know, tasers and whatnot. But again, it comes with the Solicitor General, whether they have allowed or have that in place to allow officers to carry that, because they ultimately are running the community peace officer program.
Does that answer your question? I'm afraid that both Councillor Pell and Councillor Hoover are rather frozen right now. So
Yeah.
please interrupt if you are. Do you have anything further that you wish to add to it, Councillor Pell? Councillor Hoover?
No, that answered my question.
Okay, is there anything more on this subject? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Deputy Mayor Stedley for that question because, of course, always been felt like a download. Once you hit 5,000, you start paying substantial cost of the provincial laws that you have to pay for policing to enforce. And I think that there's a possibility of recovery because ultimately a police officer is a police officer, and you're right, they don't know what they're going to run into. But if we're going to have our bylaw officers trained to that level and utilized by the province to carry out some of those provincial laws and the codes and things that would be, I think it'd be fair for municipalities to ask for cooperation and funding that would be on the similar. We could, if we did it in reverse, we'd be asking the province for 75%. We'd only be paying 25%. That's probably not going to happen. But it's just, I appreciate that question because the long problem of downloading onto municipalities and just being able to keep that topic alive it's certainly a good question.
Thank you. Are there any other comments that anybody wishes to make? We will move on to 8.8, the letter from the chamber. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, so council had asked for me to represent the issue of the letter that had come from Minister Gluvish, and the chamber has agreed to support the town with the concerns of us needing a registries. At that meeting, MLA Orr was we were all zoomed in. We're all on the internet meeting, and he also attended. There was some really good conversations going back and forth. I think the chamber realized how exasperated we are because Councillor Olfert was there, but also our EDO was there to be able to provide, all the things that we have tried to do. We actually have a little bit of a task force from the chamber to cooperate with the town to lobby against the province. They will write a letter and both through to the Alberta Chamber and just to work with us. So I was hoping two parts is just to inform you and then just to provide some good documentation to committee from the town so that we can continue lobbying because at that meeting, one of the members that was on there is the owner of Grandin Auto, and he said, no, I have to send all these guys for inspections out of town, just for me alone. He says, and that's only in the automotive field. We're not talking about all the births that we have and all the other things. So just a comment, and I don't know if the general public would know this, that it's just felt that there wasn't, it seemed like this comment was that the town hadn't expressed the need, or the people of the town or the businesses of the town had not expressed that there was really a need for the registries, which was kind of a real slight to all of council, all of our community, and all the work administration has done. So that's why that's going forward. It obviously is an issue and it's going to be worked on.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking that to the chamber. It was a very important item. And to the public who is watching, if you would like further information on that, I invite you to contact either Councillor Taylor or myself or CEO Thompson, and we could provide information and background if you wanted to write your own personal letter to Minister Goudache and the Premier. Go ahead.
Any councillor of the town of Blackfalds would be able to help with that.
So, is there any other items that anybody wishes to bring on under information? Not seeing any. Deputy Mayor?
I'll accept the information items as information.
Debate? All in favor? Councillor Appel, Councillor Hoover, you are going to have to verbally reply because you're frozen.
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
That is carried unanimously. Moving on. We don't have a round table tonight. Adoption of the minutes, 10.2. Are there any errors or omissions? Not seeing any. Can I get a motion for acceptance? Councilor Olford?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the regular council meeting December 8th as presented.
Thank you. All in favor? Councilor Appel? Councilor Appel?
Yeah, in favor.
Councilor Hoover?
In favor.
Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Moving on. I would like to read into the minutes 2 notices of motion that will be brought forward to the standing committee meeting. Notice of motion number 1 is I move that council consider investigating alternate budgetary development processes that may allow, sorry, I've got those mixed up. Notice of motion number 1 is I move that council request administration to provide an analysis of municipal indicators for Blackfalds, as well as provide a list of communities that we can use for comparative purposes and present these findings to council in a comprehensive manner that allows council time to question and evaluate. Notice of motion number 2, I move that council consider investigating alternative budgetary development processes that may allow council to move to more comprehensively evaluate service levels and expenditures during the budget development process. For this to be effective, council will develop directions and timelines to administration to clarify their input. And is there anything under good of the council? C.O. Thompson, did you wish to?
No additional comments, Your Worship.
Council? Not seeing any. We do have an in-camera items tonight, so could we have council motion for a break? Councilor Taylor?
So moved.
At 8:26. And all those in favor? Councilor Appel?
In favor.
Councilor Hoover?
In favor.
And that is carried unanimously.
Can I make a suggestion, Councilors Olford, or Hoover and Appel? Would you leave the